there's a lot of confusion around quarantining rules. The previous speaker called for people to self-isolate. There's a lot of concern and a growing hostility in the country that incoming tourists are flouting our laws. The Irish Times, no less, had an article last Saturday saying that the Gardaí needed to implement our laws. But the reality is, Taoiseach, there's no law to implement. There is no legal requirement to quarantine for anybody coming into this country, regardless of where they come from. And I wonder why that is. Is it based on the legal requirements of being in the EU? Of course, we can limit freedom of movement within the EU and freedom of travel, but to do so it has to be proportionate and it has to be clear, it has to be done lawfully. In Ireland, there's a question as to whether it's either proportionate or lawful, because the entire burden is being put back on ordinary people rather than the state actually doing what the state is able to do, which is to bring in laws. If we think people shouldn't be coming from Italy, then maybe make them quarantine. But we are allowing people to go to Italy. Italy is not the issue. But there are other countries like the United Kingdom, or at least parts of the United Kingdom, the United States and many other countries. And I want to know why that isn't being done.
I would say to you, in terms of the mandatory quarantine, this has been articulated for quite some time. It's impossible to enforce in the first instance. And secondly, it's questionable as to whether it's the wise approach. Because in some countries where they brought in mandatory quarantining, it actually led to a cluster developing where the actual quarantining was taking place. That happened. That did happen. And the advice we've got, and we've discussed this with WHO and others, is that really the issue is you must be able to contact people very, very quickly once they've arrived into the country. I'm responding to Deputy McNamara. Deputy Lou MacDonald got an opportunity to answer, and I really think you should allow others their time on leaders' questions. You don't own the entire Parliament, and I think you should allow other opposition deputies to have their say. I say that in good form, but Deputy McNamara that is the essence of it, and I think just walk through the logic of it. Think through the logic of mandatory quarantining. How many hotels would the state be booking? And the proportionate point that you made is very valid, and there are complex legal issues involved. But essentially, contact tracing, knowing where people are, and that's where the electronic locator form comes into play. That's the importance of that, to enable us to have a ready capacity to contact people who may have been in contact with someone who tested positive.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
I think that is actually the better approach in relation to that, and we will work with you in terms of the other issues that you raise in terms of Shannon Airport, the Shannon Group, and particularly the heritage.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. Deputy McNamara, Deputy.
Yeah, I suppose, Taoiseach, you mentioned legislation, and I agree. I mean, there are a growing number of people in the country, and there's, I think, a certain amount of hostility being encountered by tourists because people think they're flouting laws when they're not. And we need to be very clear either these people are flouting laws or they're not flouting laws.